This is Rummy's Corner. Following his recent loss against Joseph Parker in the Boxing Day of Reckoning, former WBC heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder appears to be at or nearing the end of his boxing career. Wilder has just one victory since 2019, and he has 3 losses. In addition to recently losing a lopsided unanimous decision against Parker, Wilder was also stopped in his second and third bouts of his trilogy against Tyson Fury. His lone victory during this time came against Robert Helenius, where Wilder stopped the Nordic Nightmare in round 1. Since the Parker loss, I've seen the question debated on boxing message boards and other boxing social media. Will Deontay Wilder make it into the Hall of Fame? Cutting straight to the point, in my personal opinion, I'd be very surprised if Wilder doesn't get in. I believe he will get in. Full disclosure, I don't get a vote, so my opinion on the matter don't mean jack shit. But all the same, in my experience, when these kinds of questions are brought up about whether a certain boxer deserves to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, fans tend to have far higher standards than the hall itself. And whenever you see these types of debates, it is inevitable that at some point someone will say something to the effect, well, if Arturo Gatti got in, then such and such definitely deserves to get in too. Personally, I think Gatti gets sold a little short here with that take. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have a guy like Marlon Starling, who in my opinion absolutely deserves to be inducted, and yet strangely enough, he has inexplicably been shunned by the hall. Starling's exclusion is a real head-scratcher for me. Then again, among the few people I know who do get a vote for the hall, it has been strongly suggested that the entire process is very disheartening, where many members on the voting committee don't know shit about most of the boxers on the ballot. But that is not likely to be the case when it comes to heavyweights, especially a long-reigning champion like Deontay Wilder. Heavyweights tend to generate more attention and are typically better known. Beyond that, I said before in my experience that fans generally tend to have higher standards for a boxer getting into the Hall of Fame than the hall itself, and I stand by that. However, with specific regards to heavyweights, the standards for induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame tend to be higher than they are for boxers from other weight classes. Again, I'm not citing any scientific statistical evidence about this here, but in my experience, this generally proves to be true. Wilder's loudest detractors claim that he has no skills, that he has never beaten anyone of note, and that he was a carefully managed, very protected boxer who manufactured a title reign that lacked any real substance. Many of those same critics are having a field day since Wilder was outclassed by Parker, feeling vindicated by the lopsided affair, further suggesting Wilder was never an elite heavyweight and that this fight exposed his entire career. On the other hand, as far as statistical accomplishments go, Wilder was the WBC champion for more than 5 years, and during that time he made 10 consecutive defenses of the WBC belt. That puts Wilder in exclusive company. The only other heavyweights who have had 10 or more consecutive title defenses in a single reign include Muhammad Ali, who had 10 consecutive defenses during his second reign as heavyweight champion, Tommy Burns, who had 11 consecutive title defenses, Vladimir Klitschko, who had 18 consecutive title defenses, Larry Holmes, who had 20 consecutive defenses, and the great Joe Louis, who had 25 consecutive defenses. Technically speaking, you can make the case that Holmes had 19 instead of 20, and that Louis had 26 instead of 25. But 20 for Holmes and 25 for Louis were the generally accepted numbers I remember being most frequently cited throughout most of my lifetime. Regardless, Wilder is an exclusive company here. During the long, rich history of heavyweight boxing, Wilder is just one of 6 heavyweights to ever make 10 or more consecutive title defenses. Now, Wilder's critics will claim it was a weak reign, and to be sure, it wasn't exactly a murderer's row. But was it really as bad as they say? Wilder won the WBC belt in January 2015 when he won a 12-round unanimous decision against Bermane Stiverne. This victory tends to get dismissed, and I'm not entirely sure why. Before Stiverne won the vacant WBC belt against the then very highly regarded Chris Arreola, he was the WBC mandatory for Vitaly Klitschko. But Dr. Iron Fist had called it a career before Stiverne got his shot. Point being, Stiverne was the previous mandatory, and he had won back-to-back bouts against Arreola at a time when Arreola was still held in very high esteem. My greater point here is I believe this was a great win for Wilder. Indeed, I picked against Wilder in this one, and this was not the first time I picked against Wilder. I had previously picked against him when he faced former WBO heavyweight champion Sergey Lyhovich. So by the time Wilder won the WBC belt when he pitched a virtual shutout against Stiverne, he had already proven me wrong twice. In his first title defense, Wilder stopped the WBC number 9 ranked contender Eric Molina. Certainly not the most impressive name to be sure, but Molina was very much in title contention at that time. Indeed, he would get a second title fight the following year when he challenged then IBF heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua. The fact that Molina is a 2-time title challenger in itself indicates that multiple alphabet bodies viewed him as a credible contender and a worthy challenger. Next up, Wilder defended against WBC number 12 ranked contender Johann Duhaupas, which is widely perceived as a soft touch defense, and rightly so. In January 2016, Wilder made his third title defense against WBC number 8 ranked opponent Artur Szpilka. In a bit of historic foreshadowing, then unified WBO/WBA super duper heavyweight champion Tyson Fury stormed the ring. Fury was a bit indecisive about whether or not he wanted to throw his jacket, and this arguably began a rivalry that would ultimately culminate 5 years later. Next, Wilder was supposed to face WBC number 1 contender Alexander Povetkin in May 2016. But it was reported Povetkin failed a drug test after he tested positive for a banned substance, and the Moscow fight was called off. Instead, Wilder would make his next defense a month later against WBC number 9 ranked contender Chris Arreola. Incidentally, I picked Arreola to win this one in an upset, where Wilder had officially proven me wrong yet again. The following February, Wilder made title defense number 5 against WBC number 8 ranked contender Gerald Washington. In November 2017, Wilder was due to make a mandatory defense, which was originally scheduled to be a defense against Luis Ortiz. But it was reported that Ortiz failed the drug test and the WBC withdrew its sanction for the bout. Instead, WBC number 1 ranked contender Stiverne was elevated to the mandatory position, and Wilder stopped him in the opening round. In March 2018, Wilder defended against WBC number 3 ranked contender, the undefeated aforementioned Luis Ortiz. This wound up being a very competitive and entertaining fight, one where Wilder had to overcome some rocky moments to secure the victory. Wilder detractors are critical of the New York rule that was in place at that time, where Wilder was given some extra time that was no doubt valuable. But at the end of the day, Wilder defeated a highly regarded, undefeated contender, and he did so in dramatic fashion. Later that year, Wilder faced lineal world heavyweight champion and WBC number 3 ranked contender Tyson Fury. A lot of detractors view this as a so-called cherry pick gone wrong, and Fury was always a bit of an unpredictable oddball who had just 2 victories since coming back after a nearly 3-year absence. But all the same, Fury was the rightful lineal world heavyweight champion. It was a great performance from Fury, where his superior skill set was on full display. But Wilder managed to drop Fury twice along the way, including a very brutal knockdown in the 12th and final round. Fury bounced back from that and finished the round strong, and at the end of 12 rounds, the fight was ruled a draw. A lot of people, myself included, believed Fury had done enough to earn a victory. But the fight was a draw, and by this point, Wilder had made 8 consecutive title defenses. Incidentally, I picked against Wilder in this one, and regardless of my opinion on scoring the fight, Wilder had proven me wrong once again. In May 2019, Wilder beat WBC mandatory challenger Dominic Breazeale when he scored a highlight reel first-round knockout. And finally, title defense number 10 came in his rematch against Ortiz. The fact that Ortiz had performed well in their first fight, with the touch of controversy that came with the territory of the perception that Wilder was given extra time to recover, the rematch had demand, even if the Fury rematch had greater demand. Ortiz largely outclassed Wilder for most of the contest, but Wilder hung in there and ultimately bombarded the mark with a nuclear right that ended matters in round 7. And that victory allowed Wilder to become just the 6th boxer to make 10 or more consecutive title defenses during the long, rich history of the heavyweight division. Of course, Wilder would lose his 2020 rematch against Fury. At that time, Fury was the WBC number 1 ranked contender. This rematch was ordered by the WBC. The fight was nothing like their first encounter. It was a dominant effort from Fury, who won the WBC belt from Wilder, which he still holds to this day, along with his rightful claim as lineal world heavyweight champion. After that, we had the whole COVID thing that disrupted the boxing world and the greater world at large. And then it started to look like we would get an undisputed showdown between Fury and Anthony Joshua. But that never came together because Wilder won his arbitration and Fury was forced to have his contractual rematch with Wilder following their second fight. This one wound up becoming an instant classic with intense drama throughout. Both boxers were dropped multiple times, and in the end, Fury won by stoppage in round 11. Then in his last 2 fights, Wilder beat WBC number 9 and WBA number 2 ranked Robert Helenius. And then of course he lost against a man ranked by all 4 sanctioning bodies, the former WBO champion Joseph Parker. But looking exclusively at title fights, Wilder had 13 title fights. 12 of those 13 were against opponents ranked inside the top 10 by the WBC, and 6 of those opponents were rated inside the top 5 by Ring Magazine when Wilder faced them. It is certainly not the greatest championship reign in heavyweight history. Far from it. But I do not believe it is horrible either. Take for instance Vitaly Klitschko. I really do not believe Wilder's championship reign is any worse. And in fact, I believe Wilder's 10 consecutive WBC title defenses is actually superior to Dr. Iron Fist's 9 consecutive WBC title defenses. Now, if you add in Vitaly's first reign, he had Corey Sanders to win the vacant belt, and then he beat Danny Williams. Honestly, I'm not seeing a big difference in quality here. Very similar. Both of these guys lost against the 2 best they faced. Bird and Lewis in the case of Vitaly, and Fury and Parker in the case of Wilder. Vitaly was winning the 2 fights he lost at the time they ended, but he still lost against the 2 best he faced, same as Wilder. Vitaly lost far fewer rounds, but that largely boils down to different styles, where Vitaly was a skilled boxer and an accumulation puncher, whereas Wilder was a lesser skilled sniper with a nuclear right. Personally, I rate the first victory against Stavern, the 2 victories against Ortiz, and you have to give him credit for successfully defending the WBC belt in a draw against the rightful lineal champion. Beyond that, victories against Molina and Breazeale, these guys were both 2-time title challengers, where each had likewise gotten the chance to fight for a major championship against other champions. In both cases, it was AJ. And then you have the Stavern rematch and the victory against Areola. I still think these were pretty good wins. There were some soft touches mixed in there for sure, but that is not unusual in this day and age, nor historically for that matter. And then depending on how you view things, it was either a missed opportunity or some might say a blessing in disguise that the Povetkin showdown fell apart after he tested positive. Some of Wilder's loudest critics claim that was some anti-Russian conspiracy, and what the hell do I know? Perhaps it was. But regardless, I don't believe using this to try and discredit Wilder holds any real merit whatsoever. At the end of the day, it was certainly not the best championship record. Beyond that, as to the question of whether Wilder is an all-time great heavyweight, was he a top 20 heavyweight of all time? No, definitely not in my opinion. Absolutely positively not. And that isn't meant to disrespect Wilder, but to me his resume clearly isn't good enough for that type of consideration. And this circles back to what I said earlier about most fans tending to have stricter standards than the Hall of Fame itself, where someone will inevitably bring up poor Gaddy. Point being, just because you aren't a top 20 heavyweight doesn't mean you're inherently unworthy of the Hall. I think Wilder makes it, and beyond that I likewise believe that Anthony Joshua and certainly Tyson Fury, they both make it too. And I'm not excluding Usyk either. Usyk gets in for me on the merit of what he did at cruiserweight alone. Add in what he has done in a very short time at heavyweight, Usyk will undoubtedly be in the Hall of Fame one day. But Usyk is kind of a Johnny-come-lately with the trio of career heavyweights. The fact is, Fury, AJ, and Wilder have all been viewed as legit top 10 heavyweights for nearly a decade or more. And for most of that stretch, they have been viewed as top 3. Now, Wilder's career isn't over yet. It is possible that he could still go on to accomplish more, where he can add to his legacy. On the flip side, he could go on to lose more, but I don't believe that will harm him much here. The boxing world generally tends to be forgiving when it comes to heavyweights losing in their late 30s. Not many hold Ali's late career losses against Holmes or Berbick against him. Not many hold the Easton Assassin's loss against Mike Tyson against him. And then a guy like Evander, he had several losses late in his career, and they are not typically held against him when evaluating his career. Not everyone can be Big George Foreman. In the long run, I do not believe Wilder's loss against Parker will hurt him much. You'll always have people saying that Parker would have always beaten Wilder, and maybe they are correct. All we know with certainty is that Parker outclassed Wilder when they did fight in 2023. But none of this changes the fact that Wilder was universally recognized as a top 3 heavyweight for a long stretch during the post-Klitschko era. But whether Wilder fights on and does more, whether he fights on without success, or whether he hangs him up and never fights again, I honestly believe Wilder will get in. He helped to define an entire generation within the heavyweight landscape. When you consider the fact that Wilder was a well-known heavyweight knockout artist, whose power often bailed him out in fights where he was getting outboxed, where he went on to join an exclusive group of heavyweights to win 10 or more consecutive title defenses, where Wilder had 3 fights against a lineal world heavyweight champion, and this was an historically significant heavyweight trilogy, where I think really only 3 heavyweight trilogies top it. Muhammad Ali versus Smokin' Joe Frazier, Evander Real Deal Holyfield versus Riddick Big Daddy Bo, and Floyd Patterson versus Ingemar Johansson. The Fury-Wilder trilogy was a highly dramatic and memorable heavyweight championship rivalry, the defining heavyweight trilogy of this era. Unless Fury, Usyk, and/or AJ wind up doing something remarkable the next couple of years. Wilder showed an eagerness to avenge his Fury loss, and he exhibited unwavering heart and determination until the fight was literally beaten out of him. That's a championship heart. I think Deontay Wilder deserves a place in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and more to the point, I think he will get in. But then again, what the hell do I know? I ain't exactly Quasimodo over here. What do you think? Will Deontay Wilder be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame? Please share your views in the comments section. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful night. This is Rummy's Corner.
You know, Quasimodo predicted all this.